The White House pressed for answers on the airborne objects that were shot down over North American airspace. Officials now acknowledge the three unidentified airships may have had a, quote, benign purpose, different from the Chinese spy craft that crisscrossed the country 2 weeks ago. Members of Congress have been briefed on all of this yesterday and again today. Let's bring in North Carolina Republican Senator Thom Tillis. He was briefed just a little while ago. Senator, thank you for being with us. What questions did you go into the briefing with, and were they answered?
Well, what we really wanted to understand is the different decision about when to engage and take down the objects, which I think in every case was the right decision. We're not going to know much about the three that occurred after the Chinese balloon was taken down because they're in very difficult places to retrieve the information. But I will tell you, we got a very good report on what we're getting off the Carolina coast for the first one, which clearly had a malign purpose.
So let me ask you about that, because the Pentagon is now saying that it has known about this Chinese spy balloon project for a long time and, in fact, briefed members of Congress about it last August. Were you ever briefed?
I was not briefed. I would have expected to. I'm not aware of any Senate Armed Services hearing or classified briefing on it. But one thing's important to understand. It was only it was within the last year and a half to where we understood the radio signature for this particular type of object. And then you're able to go back in history and identify the overflights. There were some Democrats that were talking about, well, this happened in the Trump administration. We simply did not have the situational awareness at the time. Now we do. And I think you're going to see a very different approach to the near space area above about 60,000 feet. And I think there are going to be a lot more eyes on it and make it less likely anything would escape detection.
So in terms of escaping detection, Senator Kennedy, your colleague, was on this morning, and he told me that in yesterday's briefing, he learned that the Pentagon, or intelligence at least, was watching this balloon from before it was launched on Hainan Island. When it was launched all the way across the Pacific Oceans, it came toward the United States. And he believes that unless somebody had spotted it and reported it, the intelligence community likely wouldn't have said boo about it and might not have even told the president. Do you share his thoughts?
I'm not really sure. He's right on the fact that we were aware of the track of the balloon. And I agree with that. I think that a part of what we were trying to do is better understand this future threat. And a part of what you want to do is gather intelligence on exactly what it's doing, tracking when it goes offline, which reports have indicated that it did go offline shortly after it entered continental U.S. airspace. But I think there is something to be said for getting ahead of the curve on informing people like me in the U.S. Senate on these emerging threats. It may have created a dialogue to where we got to an identification sooner. We would have known about these other objects and reoriented our radars and detection systems earlier than that.
Right. But just in terms of knowing about its presence, I mean, this was not a holy cow, there's a balloon above Montana. They watched this thing come across the Pacific Ocean. That's a long way, and yet they didn't take any action against it. Does that puzzle you?
Well, I think it's fair. You got to understand the majority of the water that the balloon crossed was not in U.S. territory. Once it gets into U.S. territory, you also need to look at the geography if you're going to shoot it down. The intelligence value of the balloon that's just a few miles off the coast of the Carolinas is going to be enormously valuable. And my guess is if it had gotten into international airspace, then the Chinese government probably would have demolished it to prevent the intelligence gathering that we have today. You've seen the public reports about it appears to be U.S. or English-sourced equipment that was on board, reverse engineering what that technology has in store. The majority of the debris in the Atlantic is going to be captured. It's within about 50 feet depth of water. There's an enormous intelligence value ahead. We can debate whether it should have been taken down sooner, but we are where we are, and I do think that there's going to be significant information to harvest from the recovery effort in the Atlantic.
Well, let me just ask you then quickly, just because we've got a couple of seconds left. You seem to be suggesting that the Biden administration handled this the right way in terms of what you could yield from the spy craft.
Well, I'm glad you raised it. I don't think the Biden administration's done very well on broader issue of transparency. But the fact of the matter is, it would have been helpful for us not to learn about it because somebody in Montana had the wherewithal to actually identify it. This is something that should have come before Congress. We should have been briefed on the threat when it was emerging, rather than having to come out at this point. It does raise a valid question, though. If there hadn't been pressure on the president to take action, maybe he wouldn't have taken that down in U.S. waters. And that's why I think that this administration needs to improve its F grade on transparency across the board.
All right, you get bipartisan agreement on that point as well. Senator Thom Tillis, North Carolina, good to catch up with you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And go Chiefs.
They went. They went already. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.